All right. Well, as mentioned, as soon as we're done here, you will be joined by Ambassador Ruchir Kamboj, the permanent representative of India, who will brief you on the program of work, given she's assuming today the presidency of the Security Council. The Secretary General is just now leaving Addis Ababa, where earlier today he was in the Ethiopian capital for the 6th African Union UN Annual Conference. During the conference, co-chaired by himself and the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Moussa Faki Mahamat, the participants discussed progress on the implementation of cooperation frameworks between the AU and the UN. In his remarks to your colleagues in Addis at the conclusion of the conference, the Secretary General reiterated the importance of the partnership between the United Nations and the African Union, but he added we need to supercharge development and place Africa's future at the heart of the solutions that our world needs. The Secretary General called for a new partnership for prosperity and development on the continent, but also for more support to address the climate crisis. Turning to the issue of peace, the Secretary General said that from the Sahel to the Great Lakes in Ethiopia, deep-rooted conflicts continue to challenge us. The UN, he said, will continue to work alongside the African Union to deliver peace, prosperity, and climate justice that the people of the African continent deserve. Earlier in the day, the Secretary General had meeting with Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed, and he was also joined by Mr. Mahamat. In that meeting, you will see that we issued a readout, and the Secretary General also met with the federal president of Ethiopia. And as I mentioned, he's now on his way back to New York, where he will arrive at the crack of dawn tomorrow. Humanitarian update on Ethiopia. And I can tell you that, as the Secretary General said, that despite the signing of the cessation of hostilities agreement, we have a dramatic humanitarian situation needs in areas impacted by the conflict in northern Ethiopia. This includes more than 13 million people who are food insecure, including more than 5 million in the Tigray region. As access is gradually improving, we, along with our partners, are urgently working to provide as much support as possible to people in need wherever they are. Aid deliveries by road, including some fuel, are continuing to reach Tigray. To date, we, along with our partners, have sent some 550 trucks with food and other aid into Tigray. That's in addition to the aid that the government is supplying itself. UN humanitarian flights from Addis into Tigray are continuing this week, in addition to carrying humanitarian staff and some goods. Our humanitarian colleagues stress that this will be critical to sustain the further scale-up of assistance in Afar, Amhara, and Tigray to meet the high level of needs, but other parts of the country were also facing immense needs as well. This includes in particular areas impacted by the drought in the southern and eastern parts of the country, where nearly 12 million people are facing food insecurity, and recent nutrition campaigns have found alarming levels of malnutrition, especially in children. According to the Global Humanitarian Overview for 2023, which was issued today, we and our partners are appealing for $3.5 billion to help more than 26 million people in Ethiopia in the coming year. Humanitarian update on Syria. We are told that yesterday a UN interagency cross-line convoy of 16 trucks carrying 482 metric tons of food, along with other humanitarian supplies, crossed from Aleppo into Sarmada in northwest Syria. Supplies included medicines, nutrition items, water, sanitation and hygiene items, reproductive health kits, and education materials. This is the 9th cross-line convoy in line with UN Interagency Operational Plan developed after the adoption of the Security Council Resolution 2585. Humanitarian conditions continue to deteriorate in the northwest due to ongoing hostilities and a deepening economic crisis. There are 4.1 million people that rely on aid to meet their most basic needs, and 80% of them are women and children. While an important complement, the cross-line operations is unable this time to substitute for the size and scope of the massive UN cross-border operation, which reaches 2.7 million Syrians each month with vital aid, including food and vaccines. Just to zoom out a bit on humanitarian aid, earlier today, the Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs and its partners launched a record $51.5 billion humanitarian appeal for 2023. This is a 25% increase compared to last year's appeal. The appeal comes as 339 million people around the world need assistance in 69 countries. The number of people that we intend to reach is nearly a 24% increase compared to the same time last year. Among the causes of the increase is the pressure on public health systems due to COVID, mpox, and outbreaks of Ebola and cholera. Climate change is also driving up risks and vulnerability. The response plan in the Global Humanitarian Overview details how aid agencies working together around specific types of aid, including shelter, food, maternal health, child nutrition, and protection, can save and support the lives of a combined 230 million people worldwide. While donors have provided a generous $24 billion of funding as of mid-November, needs are rising faster than ever, and financial support in the funding gap has never been greater, and it's currently at 53%. Quick update from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where a peacekeeping mission received reports of human rights abuses reportedly committed during clashes between M23 and Mai Mai militia members that took place on Tuesday. The clashes occurred in Kishishi village in North Kivu and included a high number of civilian casualties. We abhor these acts and call upon all competent authorities to investigate them without delay and to bring the perpetrators to justice. Our UN Joint Human Rights Office has been seized of the matter and stands ready to contribute to these efforts. We reiterate the call of the Secretary General for all Congolese and foreign armed groups to immediately lay down weapons and enter the respective demobilization, disarmament, and reintegration and repatriation process. Moving rather down to the southern cone of Africa, Malawi today kicked off an oral cholera vaccination campaign targeting 2.9 million people. As you know, the cholera outbreak in Malawi has impacted all of the 29 districts of that country. The World Health Organization facilitated procurement of the vaccines for the government, and that was funded by the Global Alliance of Vaccines called Gavi. This is the second cholera vaccination campaign in the country, with the first campaign conducted in June in the southern part of Malawi that reached over 1.5 million people. Beyond vaccination, WHO, UNICEF, and other partners are supporting the government to provide clinical care at dedicated treatment centers. Moving to this hemisphere, today the Regional Interagency Coordination Platform for Refugees and Migrants from Venezuela, which is co-led by UNHCR and the International Organization for Migration, launched a $1.72 billion regional plan to support refugees and migrants from Venezuela throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. The funds are aimed at responding to humanitarian needs, complementing the efforts of host governments, while also promoting socioeconomic integration. UNHCR and IOM for Venezuelan refugees and migrants. Eduardo Stein, the joint representative for both UNHCR and IOM for this issue, said that many refugees and migrants from Venezuela have seen their lives come to a standstill, and millions are struggling to feed their families or find opportunities to rebuild their lives. However, they are eager to contribute to their host communities with the knowledge and skills and creativity that they have. Today is World AIDS Day, and in a message for the day, the Secretary General notes that the world has promised to end AIDS by 2030 and that we are off track. The Secretary General stressed that to end AIDS, we must end the inequalities that are blocking progress. On this World AIDS Day, he says we are calling out in one voice, equalize. The Secretary General notes that the equalize slogan is a call to action, a call to adopt the proven practical actions that will help end AIDS. And he emphasizes that the inequalities that perpetuate the AIDS pandemic can and must be overcome. 4 new resident coordinators to announce today. Our colleagues in the UN Development Coordination Office tell us that Nelson Mufu of Cameroon and Hopalong Fororo of Lesotho started their roles in leading our teams respectively in South Africa and Namibia. Meanwhile, Nathalie Fustier of France and Ulufumilayo Obosede Balongun Alexander of Nigeria are taking up their posts in Morocco and Timor-Leste, respectively. They all start today, December 1st, and they were all appointed by the Secretary General and confirmed by by the governments where they are working. Full biographies are upstairs. And tomorrow, we will have our regular briefing from our friend Maximo Torero, the chief economist of the Food Agricultural Organization, who will brief you on FAO's latest food price index. Awkward silence. Yes, Michelle, and then Edie.
Thank you, Stéphane. Yesterday, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen spoke about the EU trying to set up a specialised court backed by the UN to possibly investigate crimes of aggression committed by Russia in Ukraine. Has the SG or any other senior UN officials had any conversations with Ukraine or the EU about this? Does the SG believe this might be helpful?
I mean, Secretary General is definitely aware that there have been discussions in various fora concerning the possibility of the establishment of an international tribunal in regards to what's going on in Ukraine, and particular on the issue of the crime of aggression. The decision to establish a tribunal with or without the involvement of the United Nations is a decision that will rest with member states. Edie.
Thank you, Steph. We know that there is a ship with donated fertilizer heading to Mozambique and destined for Malawi, but can we get an update on efforts to have Russia itself export its fertilizers to the developing world farmers who desperately need?
I mean, and I think this is something that Rebecca Greenspan has talked about. She is leading on behalf of the Secretary General the efforts to facilitate this trade, right, for fertilizer, for food, which we know are not under any sanctions, but are operating in an environment that is extremely challenging, to say the least. But unlike, and we obviously played a critical role in getting that ship with the donated Russian fertilizer to go to Malawi, and we hope there will be others. But unlike the export of grain from Ukraine, we don't have a monitoring mechanism, right? So you would have to ask the Russian authorities about their exports of fertilizer to the developing world. We sort of come in when we're trying to help pave the way, but obviously there are other avenues through which that material gets out. Deji.
First, I have a follow-up with about the question Michelle asked about the special tribunal that the EU plan to establish. If the EU establishes a special tribunal without the back of the United Nations, because you said it's up to the member states, will this weak the function of the United Nations as a pillar of the multilateralism?
We're talking hypotheticals here. We believe the central role of the UN is strong, and we see it, right? Whether it's in the role of the Secretary General and others. I'm not going to comment about what may or may not happen and what impact it will have. What we do know is that there's, as a senior official of a host country once said, there are a lot of unknown unknowns.
Okay, so let's talk about some known unknowns. I have to ask you this question because we know that Black Sea Grain Initiative is quite a success so far. Yeah. But what about other efforts that the UN has been made to try to dig deeper in the Ukrainian crisis? For example, the security zone of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and the Olenivka fact-finding mission. Is there any other, progress on these issues?
Nothing to report. I mean, we would be the first ones to report if there was progress. We would want to share that with you, but unfortunately, we have nothing to report.
Okay, so one last question. Since you just mentioned about the humanitarian situation in Syria, the Syrian national media these days, they continuously reported what they called a stolen oil from the of the United States from the Hasaka province from Syria to Iraq. And the latest report is from today. They said like 54 tanks of oil has been stolen by the United States. Since they accuse U.S. to do this since this, I think, August already. It's like 4 months. Do you think the UN might need to ask member states to investigate in this issue?
Well, I mean, we have no investigatory mandate or way to know what is actually going on. What is clear is our principal position is that the natural resources of a state belong to its people. Pam and then Evelyn.
Thank you, Steph. Back to UN, World AIDS Day. There will be something coming up in about an hour, but is it the position of the Secretary General to work with WHO? There's been calls for vaccine for AIDS. I mean, is there anything that the SG is doing to further that?
Well, I mean,
Thanks.
you know, our instrument on which to combat AIDS is UNAIDS, which is a joint program of WHO and other agencies, and the Secretary General fully supports what they do. What we need is more political will. What we need are more resources that are distributed in an equitable manner. Evelyn.
On Ethiopia, do you have any reports of fighting continuing in Tigray
No, I mean,
and Eritrea?
we do not. I mean, I do not hear. So I do not.
And on Syria, is Turkey moving in, searching for Kurds? Is that?
Well, I mean, that's you read what's in the news as well as I do. I don't
Yeah, I
have.
know.
We
I
don't
just
have a
wonder
We do not have a monitoring mission along the border.
But is it interfering with the UN aid?
I mean, what is interfering with the UN aid operation is ongoing conflict and the lack of political solution, as I think Mr. Pedersen was very clear about. Ibtisam.
Hi, Steph. Just to follow up on Evelyn's question. So, were you actually, or are you informed when such operations, for humanitarian reasons, are you informed?
It works the other way. I mean, globally, sometimes we are informed. But what the more traditional way, I mean, traditional is not the right word here. What happens when we work in conflict areas is that we have deconflicting mechanisms through which we inform the parties involved in the conflict that this is where we're going to be, right? This is what we're doing. It is not always a system where we receive word back saying, yeah, don't worry, right? It's a matter of ensuring that all the parties in any conflict know where humanitarians are moving and know where humanitarian infrastructure is.
And just a quick follow-up on that. Do you have to prepare extra now for such possible invasion
I mean,
from humanitarian aid and needs, etc.?
We're very, we don't work in a vacuum. So I know our colleagues in Syria are well aware of the situation and always have contingency plans in place. Okay, I shall go get the star attraction.